You want to write a screenplay that either sells outright, the dream of every screenwriter, or you want your script to be so good that someone hires you to write on assignment, the way many screenwriters in Hollywood make a living. But wanting it, hoping for it, is not enough. And something that can give you a significant boost, even though you may not at first think it's going to help you, doesn't have anything to do with how you write. It has to do with how the business works. And making movies is a business. So I'm going to give you a crash course on part of the business, referred to as windows. And understanding how those windows work can significantly impact what you choose to write for your next script. And I'll give you some advice for that along the way. Now, when I started as a screenwriter, studios were producing essentially three categories of movies. Low budget, under 5 million, mid budget, which is essentially 10 to 20 million, might be as high as 50, but usually 10 to 20, or big budget. These are the blockbusters, the tentpole movies. But now that middle budget group is becoming smaller and smaller. Fewer and fewer movies are being produced there. And the reason is the windows have changed. And as a result, it has significantly impacted the bottom line for many studios. So what are the windows? Essentially, a window is a release of a movie on a different platform. So when a movie is released in the theater, that is the theatrical release window. And no other platform has it, only theaters. It's the only window at that time. And then after a time, that window closes and a new window of opportunity for making money occurs. And that's really the best way to think about windows. They are windows of opportunity for making money. So not long ago, the windows looked like this. First, a film is released in the theater window. It shows in the theater, hopefully for a long time if it's good. And after that, usually a month or so after the theatrical release window closes, the film goes into pay-per-view. Maybe you've bought a movie while staying at a hotel, or might remember that when you were a kid, or watched a movie on a plane that was just in the theaters, but it's not available anywhere else yet. That's this window. Then you'd get the subscription service window. Things like HBO or Cinemax or Showtime all back in the day, they would have it. You would have to have their subscription to view it through your cable network provider. And then after that, it went to DVD or VHS before that, and then streaming. And this was a whole new window of opportunity. Everyone was excited about it, but that all kind of falls in that one window. After that, movies were sold to TV networks, and they would show them on TV with commercial breaks and everything, and they had a set amount of time that they had the rights to show that movie. And then it might be purchased again or resold to another network for another time frame. And along with this window, and kind of lumped all together, were the international market sales, where movies were grouped and blocked together, some good ones and some bad ones. They'd all just be kind of bundled together, and they were sold as a chunk to be shown in different territories around the world. And there were some nuances and things that would shift here and there. I'm giving you just the very broad gist, okay? So there's lots of nuances here, but this is kind of the gist of what happened. And there used to be all of these windows of opportunities for making money that studios would capitalize on, and more importantly, used to determine estimates for how well they thought a movie would do and whether they were making their money back and whether or not they would do a sequel. And studios really wanted to realize their money back within the first three windows, because then everything after that was pure profit. But theater attendance is down, especially since the pandemic. Subscription services are now essentially all streaming services. So if you have HBO, you can watch it whenever you want through their app, and you don't even have to have a cable provider, which many people are moving away from. So this window has merged with the streaming window, so that's one less window. And I bet many of you haven't bought a DVD in a long time. So that's basically a non-existent window. And most of you probably don't watch regular TV. And if you do, you're probably not watching movies there. So those sell for less, and studios don't make as much from selling that window anymore. And what has essentially happened is there are now fewer windows of opportunity for studios to make money on the films that they produce. And even more than that, streaming services have begun to make their own content in an effort to generate revenue for subscriptions. Everyone from Disney, Amazon, HBO, Netflix, etc. And at times that content is released in a theater, but many times it isn't. And that further limits the windows for money making. So all those mid-budget movies, the 10 to 20 million ones, that's mostly what streaming services now produce. And while they don't have to spend as much on marketing, so it doesn't cost them as much in the long run, and they do have that content in their library forever, the only way to watch it is to subscribe to their service. They just don't have as many additional windows for making money. So movies have to fit within specific parameters for a streaming service to be interested in financing it. Again, it's a business. It has to make money sense. But what about the studios? Their windows have basically been merged and cut in half, and you might be wondering why mid-budget movies are dwindling. So let me explain this with a practical example. Let's say you have a $25 million movie, a typical mid-budget movie. Okay, maybe a relatively contained action movie with a solid star attached, maybe two. The studio also now has to distribute and market this movie and pay for what's referred to as the P&A budget, the prints and advertising budget, which is typically the same amount as the shooting budget. Generally, you can kind of ballpark at that. So our $25 million film now also costs another $25 for P&A. So now we're at $50 million. And when the movie runs in the theaters get usually a 50% cut, as they should. So now, to get back our $50 million, the film has to have over $100 million in theater ticket sales, because the studio is only going to get approximately half of those ticket sales. And $100 million in ticket sales is a lot to ask for from a $25 million movie, especially since the success of a movie is now primarily based on whether the movie makes back its budget in the theatrical release window. Now, in the old days, it was easier to make back the money, and the studios could wait a little longer to do it because of all the windows. But now, there aren't as many windows. And with the streaming services producing their own content, and they probably want people watching their own content over other content, so non-streaming originals may not get as much face time for potential viewers. So now it's harder to get that film onto streaming services unless they have some kind of exclusive content agreement. And now we circle back to the types of movies being made. A bunch for less than $5 million because the risk is so low, and most of those movies have a built-in audience that can generate close to $20 million in the first window. So a horror movie that's pretty cheap is generally going to get between 10 and 20 million in the box office release. So option number one for you, write a script that is super budget friendly. You might get a studio to produce it, and you have the opportunity for a streaming service to finance it because it makes financial sense for them. The thing with streaming services, though, is they like to kind of bet on sure things. So you kind of have to know the right people, which can be more of a challenge for streaming services. But it does give you a little better shot than if you were to write a $10 to $20 million script. Option number two is you go big or go home. I mean, it's a big budget extravaganza that is hopefully based on some kind of intellectual property, IP. Some you have the rights to, or some that is part of the cultural IP, like something out of history, or werewolves or vampires or something like that, which would have a built-in audience and would definitely attract A-list actors. But that means your script has to be awesome and of the caliber that includes actor bait and great dialogue and meaningful themes and is all around entertaining. And it doesn't mean it has to be action, sci-fi, or fantasy, but most of those big budget movies fall in those camps. So determine what you want to write, determine it before you even start writing. Are you going to go small budget or are you going to go big? And if you're sitting there thinking, well, Jake, I just don't know how much things cost. I mean, how do I make sure I have a smaller budget, or how do I make sure I've got a bigger budget? This will help you out. Thank you for watching. Fun buttons and links below. Whatever script you're writing right now, put how much you think the budget is in the comments. And when you tell a story that matters. See you later.